What's up, everybody? In today's video, I'm going to be talking about the 1.5 times scope and why it is such a bad thing for Siege, or why it could be a great thing. It just depends on how Siege balances it going into the future. So the first thing that I'm going to talk about is why the 1.5 times scope is so groundbreaking. Now, the thing about this scope is it is perfect for close range and long range gunfights. This means that if you're in a close range situation where somebody's right next to you or right on you and you're shooting them, it's fine because it's not too zoomed in to where it's an issue like it would be with an ACOG or with a 2x scope in some occasions. But it's also zoomed in enough to where you can have long range fights where you can spawn peek, where you can shoot a guy that's all the way down the hallway and not worry about not being able to see them clearly because your scope is too zoomed out like a 1x scope, right? So the 1.5 is the perfect medium for being able to zoom into a screen. Now, another thing about the 1.5 that's really good is the fact that it barely obstructs your screen. Let's talk about some sites that really obstruct your screen. The 3x scope, Cali's gun, Glaz's gun, most of the red dot sites. These sites clutter up most of the peripherals around your scope, making it to where it actually hides enemies that aren't in your scope, which gives you a pretty big disadvantage. The 1.5 times scope also doesn't do this. So if you're looking at 1.5 times scopes objectively and mathematically based off of how much screen they take up and how much they zoom in, there's not a single downside to the 1.5 times scope. It is all around a perfect scope, and it's the best scope in the game. So this begs the question, why is it bad for Siege? Well, just like anything in a video game, if you give it to somebody, that person that you give it to is going to become really good. And the only people in the game that have 1.5 times scopes are really bad operators. Warden, Oryx, Nook, they're all objectively good because they have 1.5 times scopes in secondary utility, but if you look at their primary utility, it's not that good. People that need 1.5 times scopes are Tachanka, Wamai, which they just gave them to, Jaeger, I'd say. Anybody that plays with utility needs 1.5 times scopes. Why do they need 1.5 times scopes? Because this game is meant to be a utility-based game. It's not meant to be Call of Duty, which is what it is right now, because everybody that has 1.5 times scopes are just entry fraggers or roamers, and the only thing that they're supposed to do is waste time and get kills, correct? People that use utility all have one-time scopes, meaning that people who want to play the game as it's meant to be played can't do that because it's not meta to do that, because people just run around shooting with the 1.5 times scope. So overall, the 1.5 times scope is really toxic unless it's given to the right operators. And Ubisoft noticed this recently whenever they gave the 1.5 times scope to Wamai and Tachanka, like I said earlier, and they took it away from Kapkan and Oryx because those two operators were really high win percentage and really high pick percentage, meaning they were being picked a lot and they were being won with a lot. So they took away the 1.5 times scope and their pick rate immediately declined, just like Alibi whenever they took away her 1.5 times scope, and their win rate also immediately declined. So there's literally a direct correlation between how much an operator wins and how much they're picked, ratioed to if they have a 1.5 times scope or not. That's how influential this scope is. So if they give it to the wrong operators or they don't distribute it evenly, it could completely destroy the fabric of an entire meta for this game. But if they give it to the right people, it could make a beautiful meta that is better than any meta we've ever seen. They just need to give it to the right operator, so it could either make or break Siege. One thing that I also wanted to talk about on 1.5 times scopes specifically is, like I said, they're not too zoomed out or too zoomed in. This makes controlling recoil very easy. So not only is it very good, but it's also very newer player friendly, it's very console player friendly, and it's very just bad player friendly in general. So having a 1.5 times scope is always going to be an advantage, and that's why they need to start giving it to the correct operators. We could even say this for the 2x scope as well. The 2x scope has very little downsides. It's second to the 1.5 times scope in terms of being one of the best scopes in the entire game. The only downside to the 2x scope is it's a tad bit zoomed in and it takes up a tad bit more space than the 1.5 times scope. But on certain maps that are really long range, let's take Bank, Theme Park, or Chalet for example, the 2x can actually be a bit better than the 1.5 times scope. So this comes with issues as well. They gave Tachanka a 2x scope, they gave Rook a 2x scope, Goyo has a 2x scope, Alibi has a 2x scope. All of these operators have 2x scopes, albeit not on some of their primary best weapons, but still they have 2x scopes. And some of these operators are played just for their 2x scopes, Rook and Tachanka being the main two. But compared to the 1.5 times scope, this is actually good, because nobody would be playing Rook. He wouldn't be the highest win percentage defense operator on PC for Emerald and above if he didn't have that 2x scope, because the 2x scope, being that it's so rare, is what makes an operator unique, because the 2x scope is very powerful. Not only is it powerful, but it's very powerful on defense specifically, because you're able to sit in sight and you're able to hold extremely long pixel angles through the map and kill people that have to walk into you. The only viable reason that you would ever hold an angle as Siege is if you're on defense and you're anchoring, and if you have a really good scope, and people have this with the 2x scope, so it's actually kind of broken. If you go to Bolo's streams, he is playing nothing but Tachanka and Rook right now on defense because of the 2x scopes. If you again look at the win percentage of operators, the highest win percentage out of any defensive operator for PC, Emerald, and above ranks is Rook, just because he has the 2x scope. Now you could argue, oh, he brings Rook armor, or oh, he revives himself with Rook armor and he revives his team teammates. That has nothing to do with it. That has absolutely zero fucking reason to do with why Rook is so good. Zero at all. If you're telling me that you're picking Rook for his actual Rook armor, either you're lying or you're a really low rank that just brings Rook because they don't know who else to play. You bring him for the 2x scope. So does everybody else. He has a high win percentage because the 2x scope is free kills and it's overpowered. On PC specifically, people get headshot like 30% more often than people on console. So at least for the Rook stats on PC, I know it's the 2x scope and not the armor because people aren't getting revived on defense as much. They're just getting headshot because people have better aim on PC. So it is literally just the 2x scope that is making Rook so high up on the win percentage list. So like I said, the biggest mistake that Ubisoft can make is giving the wrong scopes to the wrong operators, specifically the 1.5 times scope and the 2x scope. So what does this mean for you, a player watching this video, wanting to know more about scopes and wanting to know more about what makes the scope so broken? What it means is you need to be playing operators with the 1.5 and the 2x scope. Really just the 1.5, but if you're out of options, maybe you want to play Tachanka, then the 2x scope. Not only because the 1.5 times scope is very, very easy and because it's very, very good, but I'm not just talking out of my ass here. I've shown you time and time again throughout this video and many other videos that it is statistically and mathematically proven that any operator that has a 1.5 times scope has a much higher win percentage than any other operator in the entire game. You literally win more rounds if you play operators with a 1.5 times scope. I've made 3 operator guides in the past 3 days, a Yana guide, a Wamai guide, and a Tachanka guide, all because they have 1.5 times scopes. All of those operators, by the way, are the only reason that I've gotten champ as easily as I have, because I just play people with the 1.5 times scope or the 2x on rare occasion. It's literally that easy. You're always going to outdo somebody with a 2 zoomed in scope like an ACOG or a 2 zoomed out scope like a 1x scope. It is mathematically and statistically proven. Now, the last thing I'm going to go over is possible fixes. So like I said, obviously earlier in the video, you could just give 1.5 times scopes to utility operators. That way it's more of a utility meta, the way Siege is meant to be played, but there are some other ideas as well that I want to share with you. First of all, Garfield has documented a short about this where he talked about a possible fix, which is a bit more controversial, but still as effective. And it's essentially just giving every operator a 1.5 times scope, specifically on defense, but we'll get into that later. If you give every single operator a 1.5 times scope, just like you give every operator a 1x scope, not only are you not limiting certain operators like Mute who need a 1.5 to be very, very, very effective in solo queue, but you're also making it to where not every single operator that has a 1.5 is immediately way more won as compared to operators with just the 1x, because it's an even playing field. Not only are you making it an even playing field and you're making the pick rate not skewed, but you're also making it to where we're not in a fragger meta anymore, where people are just running around shooting people. You're making it a more utility meta, because inherently operators with utility that bring more to the table are better operators and are going to win you more rounds because everybody has 1.5 times scopes and it's completely even. So that's definitely one take. But then you have to think about the repercussions, like, okay, if everyone has a 1.5 times scope, no one's going to use 1x scopes unless they're like playing on 5-4 or they're bolo, right? So you kind of have to think about the repercussions of said actions, but it's a lot easier than going to every single individual operator and determining if they need a 1.5 times scope or not, and then being wrong and putting into course new metas that shouldn't exist, like you did with Alibi and with Oryx. We've seen history and we're seeing it repeat itself right now. This happened with the 2.5 times scope or the ACOG, whatever you want to call it. Really, really good operators were just played because of this ACOG, Bandit and Jaeger being a great example. But there's something different. Jaeger and Bandit also brought really, really good utility. So it was still very fun to play because not only could you run around and shoot people, but it was still a utility meta and it was being played as the game was meant to be played. So people constantly say like, oh, Jaeger would be OP and Bandit would be OP if they had the 2.5 times scope, so it's glad that they took them off. Well, yeah, but like, who cares? I'd rather have Jaeger with a 2.5 times scope or a 1.5 times scope for that matter than have Alibi, Oryx, Yana, Nook, and Warden with 1.5 times scopes, because their utility is dog shit and we're just in a team deathmatch gunner heavy meta right now, and whoever has the best aim is just going to hit the higher ranks no matter how much utility they bring. And that's not what Siege is meant to be. The whole cool thing about Siege is that the game is like 80% strategy and 20% aim, and the people with the best strategy, the people with the best plans in their head, the people with the most game sense dominate the ranks. So now you're having people that don't deserve champ and probably deserve like a gold hitting champ every season. That's why there were, I want to say, what, like 14,000 champs in total last season, and I think that was just on PC. No, that was total. But they had way too many champs last season, like way too many. I'd say like a fifth of the player base was champ. Absolutely ridiculous amount of people were champion last season just because it's a fragger meta, because of the 1.5 times scope. So literally, again, statistically proving that the 1.5 times scope can completely ruin a game and completely ruin who deserves what rank. Like literally the 1.5 times scope is giving people champ. It's just giving people champ. So if you want champ, just run good operators with the 1.5 times scope. It is literally that easy. Anyways, enough ranting. My name's Alka. I will see you all in the next video. Sub the channel down below, like the video down below as well. And that's it. Later.